This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Episode 683, my friends. Thanks for joining me. We're really cranking them out this week because I will be off in a couple weeks, moving into a new place. So might as well get all these great conversations out of the way. Today we want to talk about when is it time to learn to code. And you know what? One of my kids used to go to code camp, and I have to say that probably I never learned how to code. It wasn't top of my list. I'm a content creator, and today sometimes I wish I knew a little bit more about coding, right? Like now I have to Google it or go to Perplexity and say, what do I do with this? How do I fix it? Probably not the most efficient way to do it. So we're going to be talking to Felienne Hermans. She's a professor of computer science education in Amsterdam. Very excited to hear her take on when should kids learn to code. When does it make sense? And before we get to her, I want to share with you her book. You can also get that on Amazon right there. And we are live streaming to Amazon once again. So everything around me, sound panels, everything, gaming chairs, fake plant, you can actually buy in the product reel on the bottom. So let's get on the show here, find out when does it make sense to learn to code, what age, etc., etc. Felienne, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Nice to have you.
Nice to see you. We'll throw up your website there as well.
Thank you.
In case anyone was wondering, I actually grew up maybe, a couple hours east of Amsterdam in Düsseldorf, Germany. So, of course, for Europeans, 2-hour driving time is way farther than 5 hours for us in North America. But anyway, let's get to the topic. We're not a geography podcast, as I said yesterday too, actually. So tell me about when should children learn to code? When does it make sense? Like, is it like should it be like everybody? Should it be certain interests, skill sets? Like, when does it make sense?
Yeah, so I definitely think it makes sense to learn a little bit of programming for everyone. And just like we teach all kids to draw and we teach all kids to do storytelling and writing, and some kids might become Agatha Christie or Pablo Picasso, but still, even though not everyone will become a professional writer or a professional artist, those skills are just something that we think is very important for kids because it's fun. It's super cool to create something, to express yourself in a way that no one has expressed themselves before. So that is very much my perspective on learning to program. It isn't like, oh, we have a shortage of programmers, so kids need to learn programming to fill those vacancies. It's much more about the joy that I'm seeing if I'm teaching kids programming myself. Like, oh, I made this drawing but with code, or I made this animation or this story or this small app for my mom or my brother to use. It is that creativity that I'm so interested in teaching.
What's interesting to me too is, certainly I've learned more things than I ever thought I would learn when it comes to coding and code and all these different things. But what I still kind of struggle with a little bit is like, where is the baseline? Like, what should I have learned? And everything I learned has been like trial and error, right? You know what I mean? Like something isn't working. And sometimes like my website would crash and I go to the developers and I say, what happened? And they find this little bitty thing on some page and there's like some code that's crashing something. Or back in the day, it was like the quotation marks that would crash in certain countries, and I was like, how do you ever know? How do you even get that baseline? And how would that work? Should it be in schools? Should it be like a code camp, or where should it happen?
Yeah, so my ideal world, definitely it would happen in schools, because then you really get all kids. There's a really big problem now with code camps, even though they're really nice, right? And I often also teach in out of school programs that kids go there that already have an interest. And very often they also have parents that have an interest in that, right? So then you only get a small subset of children, very often boys, very often kids from families that are a little bit more well off so that their parents have time and money to spend to bring the kids to the code camps. So if we are truly believers, which I am, that all kids should learn a little bit of programming, then it is important to do it into schools. So a lot of my evangelism, so to say, is going more and more towards teachers nowadays and parents, and less to children themselves. Because if you get one teacher, you get like 30 kids times maybe 25 years. So that's really where the big win is.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. I think it's going to be a struggle to get into schools, to be honest. I mean, there's some schools, they struggle with what I would say basic technology sometimes. So now we're talking about coding. How do we do it? How do we get it there? And whatnot. So what kind of level of, like, explain to me what coding is. So in my article on christophtrapp.com, I'm kind of joking. I'm like, is it coding that I understand HTML and what to delete and what to update? Do I need to do PHP? Do I need to do? Now I sound like I know what I'm talking about. But what are those different levels of coding that you even need to think about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the basic level is just understanding how to make a computer go brr, right? How to make sure that a computer does a thing you want. And that thing that you want can be really broad. So if you're a small business owner and you want to have a website, then yes, it is nice to know a little bit of HTML so that you have an idea of what the structure of a website is. Not even necessarily so that you can write it yourself, but just this situation that you are describing, right? Your website is broken and you go to the tech department or you're a tech person and you want to have some sort of impression of what are the things that could potentially go wrong. Like, I am not a car mechanic, but if I bring my car to the shop, I know that the thing has wheels and it has a motor and it has an ignition and stuff like this. So this makes a conversation with the car shop somewhat easier for me because I have a sense of what's in there. So I think that's, if all people in the world would already have that basic level, like what are the important ingredients of a computer and what is the stuff that makes it work, that already would be, I think, a better situation than we are in now, where so many people just think that, it is pure magic, or it's something that's incomprehensible for them and they will never reach the level where they can have a certain understanding. But of course, everyone can really understand a little bit, whether that's HTML for a website or PHP, as you were just mentioning, which is a programming language to create websites on the back end and not on the front end. So the technology where you store data and not the technology where you look at the layout of the website. It doesn't really matter. Just the basics of how does a computer do the things that it does.
Back in the day, I did a little bit of coding in GeoCities, and now I'm definitely, dating myself, right? And that was definitely a while back. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but like some kind of forms or something like that. But let's talk about, what does coding actually accomplish? I mean, you talk about the website, HTML, which typically comes up in articles, right? Like you write one place, you copy and paste it over. There's extra HTML, like people bold H2, so you got to delete the bolding. Why is that even in there? So, but before I actually get there, my original question, but like some of the extraneous code, does that actually matter if you have an H2 that's also bolded and it's going to look bold anyways? Does it matter to delete stuff like that, or do the computers, they don't care anymore?
Yeah, that is a great question. So now we're getting into the differences between a language like HTML and a system that uses the language. So HTML is used in many places, like your web browser uses it. But if you have a WordPress website, then maybe there might also be some additional HTML or CSS on WordPress, and or all sorts of other places. And the way one system handles this might be different from the way another system handles this. So is this a problem? We can't really say for sure, because your browser is probably going to be able to handle the duplication, but another web system might say, oh, this is conflicting information because I got this information and also the other information. So there's really a difference between a programming language and a system that uses the programming language. For example, a browser like Edge or Chrome or Safari.
So what I actually heard there is that don't use extra code. So if you have an H2, don't make it bold as well in the code. No reason to do it. Like, right, that's really the simple answer. And then you don't have to deal with it. So, follow the best practices. Now, what are the things, so you talk about the web browser a little bit and how things are rendered, but what other things would people, use coding skills for? I mean, like building an app or, building, I mean, like, give me like, I don't know, 4 examples.
Now, building an app for sure, right? Having something simple on your phone, maybe something you just want to have for yourself or for your small business. You want to have an app where people can also order something that's a little bit simpler than your website on the internet. That is definitely something that people are interested in. But another example I also very often give is spreadsheets, right? Just analyzing data. This too is a form of programming. If you just have some customer data in a spreadsheet and you calculate the sum of it, and now you want to say, oh, who of my customers has been buying 2 or 3 products? So maybe now you use a spreadsheet formula or you use a pivot table. That too relies on some knowledge of how data works and how a computer works. And I think maybe that is like my favorite example of programming is spreadsheets because it's very approachable. Many people I've spoken to in my research that has also looked at how people use spreadsheets, people say, I'm not really a programmer. I'm just an accountant. I'm like, show me your spreadsheet. And they have this massive spreadsheet with like 50 different worksheets and pivot tables and formulas. Like, this is programming, right? These concepts that you're using, like an if statement that you also have in Excel, like a sum if or a count if statements are like one of the core principles of programming. And people are like, I didn't know I was a programmer, right? It's not something they see themselves as, but definitely the simple data analysis in a spreadsheet, and then maybe later on with a little bit of Python for data analysis, that too is programming and is where you use programming skills.
I try to stay out of spreadsheets, but I do actually currently use a spreadsheet that has all these rules, right? And everything is weight based on what I'm looking for. And it basically like it highlights stuff. Like if it's a certain score, it's green, and it goes to yellow, and then it goes to red, and all these different things. Now, I'm not going to take credit for actually doing that, but even getting the basics down on programming, can that teach me to think about these things and implement them? Because I'm thinking about even as simple as out of office replies, right? Or there was something like that. There was like a forward or an out of office reply, and somebody didn't follow the rule exactly, so they couldn't figure out why it wasn't doing what they thought it would do. But it's like this logical thinking maybe that you can learn if you
Yes.
dive into programming.
Those are excellent examples. So something like a rule-based system in Outlook, if I'm away on these dates and if this person is in my organization, then they get an email. That too is this if construction. That is one of the basic building blocks of programming. So definitely if you learn a little bit of programming, you will get better at understanding these types of rules, if only for the fact that programming really drives home the message that the computer does what you tell it to do, right? It doesn't think, it doesn't interpret what you probably would like a human being can do, but a computer is very precise. So practicing this and realizing that whether it's a spreadsheet or an HTML page or an Outlook rule, it is exactly rule-based and follows this logic. Those are things you will learn if you pick up a little bit of programming.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit here on, does everybody really need to learn the if this, if that kind of rule thinking? I mean, so like, what kind of jobs would you need it on? I mean, you already mentioned accountant. I mean, I certainly think like any office setting really, right? I mean,
Yes.
even as
So that's
simple as, I mean, so is that everybody or like who else?
Yeah, so a lot of people have an office job, right? That involves a little bit of either looking at data. Like this can be as simple as a teacher, right? If you're a teacher, I'm also teaching, you have a system in which all the grades of your students are organized. But sometimes you want to have just a little bit more than the system offers, right? I want to have also the data from the previous term, and I want to nicely compare who in my class is doing a lot worse than the previous term. And this system doesn't really allow me to put it next to each other easily. So I'm like, download to Excel and just compare a little bit of data. So any office jobs, teachers, but also at maybe another level, like let's go back to the car mechanic example, that usually like in the before times, if you brought your car to a shop, then the guy or girl, often a guy, that would look at your car, like didn't have anything to do with software. But now a car it's just a computer on wheels, right? You go to the shop and then the guy or girl says, Oh, I need to do a software update. Oh, there's a USB slot in my car, and you can download all the data to see if the car is running properly. So even in jobs that aren't office jobs, software is everywhere, and just having a little bit of basic understanding and not just follow the manual and click these buttons, but just an understanding of what a computer is doing, and a car and a washing machine and all of these things are now also a computer. Just a little bit of understanding that is going to be helpful for a lot of contexts.
I heard the story from somebody that back in when I was growing up, right, people fiddled on cars, they worked on cars, and today that's not even possible anymore because, as you said, it's a computer and you have to do certain things and plug in and diagnose and whatever. I mean, do you agree with that statement or no?
I definitely agree with that statement. It's a lot harder to actually, if something is happening with your car, to figure out what's going on. I have an electric car, and the other day it wouldn't charge, right? It just says charging error. Right? And then you cannot bring it to any shop, whereas in the before times, any car mechanic can open a motor and see what's wrong. But now you have to go to a dedicated shop that has a subscription to my car software so that they can download the information. I really agree that you need to have some understanding now. And of course, it's not a good situation that a lot of this knowledge is hidden and that you need a subscription to read the data from your own car, right? That wasn't the case before because all cars were somewhat similar, even though, of course, people specialized in like a Volkswagen or a Volvo. It was a lot more similar than it is now.
I took my car to the shop because the tire system was not working. The measurement, there was nothing even wrong with the cars, but the measurement
The
piece,
sensor, yeah.
or the sensor was not working. And so they replaced one and then they replaced another and then another one. I was like, just replace all the last two because I'm just going to be back in a couple weeks anyways. But again, like nothing was wrong with the car, but we fixed it because at the end of the day, how else would I know if there actually is something wrong? So we're more and more dependent on using this technology. Now, let's assume, you and I are on the same page. This is an important topic, but we're not in charge of school curriculum anywhere, right? Whether it's the Netherlands or all the different states in the United States here. So let's say students don't have the opportunity to learn this in primary education. How can they catch up? What can they do? I already mentioned code cams. There's some of those around here and there. What else? What are some other ways to catch up, learn some of the basics?
Yeah, so luckily there's a lot of free resources where kids, together maybe with parents or people in a code club, can learn programming. So one of the famous systems that many people might have heard of, even if they just know the name, is Scratch. This is created by MIT. And this is a little bit like a Lego block system where you click blocks together to create animations or games. So that's definitely something people can check out. And then if your kids are a little bit older and they want to have something that's somewhat more geared towards professional learning, I have designed a system myself, which is called Heddy.org, where you can learn Python in a sort of a kid-friendly way that's a little bit less daunting than an actual professional language. And Scratch is free and open source, and so is Heddy. So there's a lot of places where kids can learn free. And of course, if you're a parent and you're willing to spend a little bit more money, then there's also systems where you can have a subscription to lessons, or code clubs might be in your vicinity. A famous one is called Coder Dojo, that's happening around the world, where programming volunteers on like Saturdays or out of school times teach children programming. So there are still a lot of opportunities, even if in the school of your kids currently this isn't being taught.
So you mentioned the one you created. I'm just looking. I'm looking around your website. I'm not seeing it on the top of my list here. But how do people even find that? And
yeah, so it has its own URL. That's www.heddy.org. So that's the best place to go. That is easier than my personal website.
Got it. And you can just go over there, and I'm going to throw this up here in a second.
Absolutely.
And start learning. Kind of walk us
Thank
through
you.
that. It's textual programming for the classroom. So you just go in there, start learning, and kind of start walking through it. It's like self-paced, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can use it as a teacher if you do want to use it in schools, because I said, like, if you can get it to schools, that is really awesome, because then you get a lot of kids at the same time. But you can also just use it as a parent or as a kid. You can walk through the lesson materials also.
At what point is it too late for me to learn? I mean, middle-aged guy here, no hair left to pull out, but is it still time? I mean, am I too late to the party, or should I? What should I learn? When is it too late? When is it the right time?
I don't think it's ever too late. Like, do you want to learn? Do you think there's value in it? I mean, of course, it's not going to immediately add value to any job because, like learning anything, I don't know, learning to play soccer or tennis or learning Spanish or Chinese, it is a big investment. And in the beginning, you think, oh, I'm so bad at this, I will never pick up. But if you are interested and determined, then you can still learn. So there's definitely not an age that is too old. You can still learn. And it's such an interesting space because forever, since I have been in programming, which also is a long time, but it's like 2 decades. Every year people were saying, I know so many things have changed in the last year. Oh, things keep changing. And they keep changing all the time. So even people that have been in the field, of course, we have a leg up. People that already know programming. It's a lot easier to learn a new programming language. But also for us, things are changing all the time. So you can catch up and you can get a reasonable level, even if you're already older.
I wanted to show this to everybody quickly here. Of course, I had to pull it
Awesome.
up. This is how
Thank
Hetty
you.
looks, and you can copy over like this example code here and then actually kind of try it yourself. So it's really kind of nice to run the code, read it out loud, and try different things. There's different exercises and whatnot. So that is definitely cool. Very easy way to learn on your own and kind of get the basics, right? Basically out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So tell us about, well, I don't know what happened here. This is what happens when I bring up other things. So like, who should reach out to you? Who should connect with you? And like, who do you work with, I guess?
Yeah, so definitely we work with a lot of teachers. Hattie is sort of aimed at 5th, 6th, 7th graders, so from like 10 years and on. So teachers or parents of kids of that age that are really interested in learning programming, they can definitely reach out. We have a whole welcome package to help teachers get started. You can be paired with an experienced teacher in programming to help you get started through our community. So definitely teachers and parents of kids that want to learn programming are welcome to connect with me all the time. And then on the other hand, there's people like you, or maybe people that are programmers already, but they want to learn more. They want to learn a new programming language or a new platform, but they're struggling to learn. Like, how do I learn programming? If you're asking that question to yourself as a professional, definitely reach out to me, but also like check out my book because that's exactly what my book is about. My book will help you to learn programming on your own. So not in a school context. If you're struggling to learn programming, you're like, why, right? Is my brain broken? Am I doing something wrong? Then the book will really give you a theoretical understanding of how learning works, how learning of programming works, but it will also give you concrete exercises and strategies that you can use if you want to learn programming. So it's not a book that will teach you programming, but it's a book that will teach you how to learn programming, and that will make it a lot easier for you to consume all sorts of other resources, whether that is learning HTML or PHP or Python. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out my book.
Super interesting. The book is available if you're watching on Amazon. Everything around me is available as well down below. If you're not watching on Amazon and you want to connect there, Christoph Trapp on Amazon, you should find my storefront. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Nice to meet you, and good luck, everyone. And we're out.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.